Welcome back to the Power of Coffee. This is the next 10 pages to make it the 130th page of the story. Where are we now? Now, Madeline is at home in the apartment she hired while in Canada. She's speaking with Peter Brooks, who is a lawyer and also her former lecturer at law school. She's going to discuss with him her friend's death, the concussion she supposedly suffered from, and what could have caused it. Okay, so that's where we are now. Let's continue with the story. I learned about this from the hospital administrator, Dana Westfield. She explained. Consequently, she concluded that she believed someone could be behind it, although she knew nothing about her friend's personal life. Maybe she has someone, like a boyfriend, perhaps. We'll have to find out from her colleagues if there was anyone like that. Madeline said, sounding optimistic. Peter was quiet, analyzing it all. As a lawyer with over 4 decades of experience, he had come across similar cases where the victims seemed to be alienated from all possible suspects. Moments later, he spoke. From what you just told me, I think you're right to believe that someone could be behind it. I've had like cases where there seemed to be no possible explanation for sudden death. Because according to the victim's family or colleagues at work, he or she had no one. And when you hear that, you just know that something isn't right. It's either someone is lying or you're not seeing things properly. Madeline gently nodded. Peter proposed that they began the investigation by interviewing Lumley's colleagues at the hospital. And he has someone for that. Her name was Angela Gatton, a registered police detective with one of the city's police department. She was 40 years old and had been in a working relationship with Peter since he set up a branch of his law office in Toronto about 15 years ago. He called her up to meet with him and Madeline at her apartment at her earliest convenience, and she replied that she was presently free and therefore could make it there in about an hour. Consequently, she arrived, and Peter introduced the two. "Hello, nice to meet you," Angela said with a grin, and Madeline remarked, "Thanks for coming. We really appreciate your help." Angela knew nothing about the case, but she responded, "It's my job to help in any way I can. So no need to thank me. It's my job to help in any way I can, so no need to thank me." Consequently, Peter began to divulge the case to her. They were all seated in the living room now, beside the fireplace. Madeline had offered to serve her some coffee, but she politely turned it down, saying that she was all right. After Peter's disclosure, she remarked that she had often worked on cases like this. And just as Peter said earlier on to Madeline, it's either someone was covering up or the person investigating was overlooking certain things that may not be in plain sight. Okay, so where are we now? After Peter Brooks had gone to see Madeline in the apartment, he called up Angela Gatton, who is a police officer. They had been in a working relationship for about 15 years now. So he called up Angela, and Angela came over to Madeline's apartment, and they are discussing about Lumley's death, okay, the concussion, what could have caused it. So that's where we are now in the story. The St. James Specialist Hospital was one to trust in terms of healthcare since it had all the nation's top physicians. It was a preferred medical center for some of the country's elite, and over the years it had been free of scandals. But who could tell how much they might have had to cover up in order to achieve that? About an hour later, Detective Angela left, and soon afterward, Peter followed. He was officially on Lumley's case now, since the one he was working on was nearly over. The detective was going to visit the hospital soon, after setting up a timetable for that. After 15 years in the field, Angela was a senior and therefore enjoyed some flexibility in exercising her duties. She still had someone above her to report to, but that wasn't an issue. For this case, she planned to use two of her best protégés. 25-year-old Phoebe Brodt and 27-year-old Jean Powers. Phoebe and Jean were women who graduated from separate police colleges, and they had been working together and learning from her since 5 years now. Phoebe was fierce, that is to say, she was ready for every job, be it patrolling the dark street, interrogating criminals in porous police stations, or fetching nearly everyone some coffee as a way of celebrating her latest achievement. Jean was quite forceful as well, but she never failed to mention that she had kids waiting for her at home. Jean was quite forceful as well, but she never failed to mention that she had kids waiting for her at home when she had to take on a big tax. She used that as a yardstick for keeping away from unnecessary risks. Angela respected that because she too had family, 2 young boys and a husband who worked as a truck driver, so was barely home to take her place. The boys aged 5 and 7 were with her mother in another town, and she visited them as often as taking a lunch break. As for her truck driver husband, Jason, the only time she was with him was when he was driving by and could offer her a lift to the restaurant for lunch. Nonetheless, he also took breaks, but it was only when he was too stressed to continue on the road. 2 days after sorting out her work schedule, Angela set off to the hospital with Phoebe and Jean. They were dressed in their police uniform, and their first stop was at the administrator's office. At 10 in the morning, they were sitting in Dana Westfield's office. Though she was absent, her secretary, Ruby Miles, had let them in to wait for her. She assured them that she was on her way and was usually at work around this time. "She'll soon be here. Excuse me," Ruby said, and then left them alone. Angela glanced at the 2 women beside her and then asked if any of them wanted to go out for a bit, perhaps for some coffee or just to get some air before the day's work began. They both responded that they were all right, and so the trio continued to wait. 10 minutes later, Ruby bashed in, smiling, to tell them that her boss was in. "She's here. She'll be with you in a moment," she said, and then Angela replied, "Thanks," and then she left. Dana Westfield was coming from home, but it wasn't a good time to interrogate her, since she barely got any sleep the previous night. Dana was 56 years old, but looked like 40. She liked to wear her dark hair short and curly. Her lipstick was pale pink, and her earrings were small and did not dangle like handcuffs. Unlike most women, she wasn't a fan of unnecessary cosmetic treatment that did more harm than good, so her youthful appearance was not So her youthful appearance was not thanks to some surgeon. Rather, it must have been because she had no children, and also because she had never bothered much about anyone except herself. At 56, she lived alone, though she had previously been married, twice in a row. The first at the age of 28, when she just joined the hospital in the capacity of a procurement officer, and the second was when she turned 35. Some said it was the job at the hospital that kept her too busy to want to stay home with anyone, but now she had found a solution to her self-inflicted loneliness. She started going out 3 months ago with friends around her age. She had about 3 of them, and they never missed any fun in town. They never missed any fun in town, any fun moment in town. Yesterday they had been to a party at the beach resort, and she only got back after midnight, around 2 a.m. Ruby had rung her up and told her about a police detective who was waiting at her office. But then she was awake. By then she was awake and getting ready to shower in the hot tub. She was checking the water temperature while brushing her teeth when the call came in. And when she heard there was a detective waiting to speak to her, she thought it had something to do with where she was the previous night. Since she had driven someone else's car away, mistaking it for hers, because she was in a hurry to get home for work today. She was yet to make contact with the person and thought perhaps the person had already contacted the police. However, when she entered the room and saw Angela flanked by her 2 assistants, she had a change of mind. "Detectives, how may I help you?" she said, glancing at the 3. Angela stood up to introduce herself, and Jean and Phoebe did the same. "I'm Detective Angela Gatton from the Toronto Police Service, and these are my assistants, Phoebe Broad and Jean Powers." "All right, how may I help you?" Dana said, and then sat down. Subsequently, Angela took a seat along with the others. "I'm here to talk about Lamley O'Kine, the nurse who died some weeks ago from a concussion I had. What can you tell us about her? What do you think happened to her to die so quickly?" "What do you think happened for her to die so quickly, so suddenly?" Angela said, in a casual tone. Jean and Phoebe kept their gaze at the woman before them, waiting to take down her input. "Yes, Lamley was a nurse here, and she did die of a concussion, per the autopsy results. She was all right when she arrived on the morning of August 5, and then later that day, I guess early afternoon, she complained of feeling dizzy, and then she just collapsed. There were witnesses, about 3 nurses, who found her in the corridor leading to the pediatric center." "Did they find her after she had fainted or before she fainted?" Angela said. "Well, I guess it was before, else how could they have known that she was dizzy?" Dana replied. "Can I see them, the 3 nurses who attended to her?" Angela said, and then Dana gently smiled and replied, "Of course, you can ask them anything you want. I'll get them here right away. Excuse me." "Thank you," Angela replied, and subsequently Dana got up and left the room. About 15 minutes later, she returned to the room in the company of 2 female nurses. "Detective, these are the 2 who were with her. These are the 2 who were there when she fainted. The 3rd one hasn't reported for work yet. It seems she's taken a break of some sort," Dana said, and then added, "I'll leave you to interrogate them. Excuse me." However, Angela stopped her from leaving by asking her to stay. "No, wait. I think you should stay. If you don't mind, of course," Angela said, and Dana gently inhaled and then briefly smiled and sat down. The nurses began by stating their names as Margot Verde and Cassie Hernandez, and the department in which they served. Margot claimed she worked in the maternity ward, while Cassie said she was based at the pediatric ward. Casey said she was based at the pediatric ward. Subsequently, Angela asked them about their relationship with Lamley, how close they were to her. They both said they only knew her as a colleague and had no prior relationship with her before meeting at the hospital. Consequently, Angela asked them to recount the day that Lamley fainted in their sight. Margot, tell me what happened on August 5, on the day Lamley fainted. Where were you? Angela said, in a casual tone. John and Phoebe were scribbling down what was being said. On August 5, I was here at the hospital. I arrived at 7 a.m. coming from the nurse's quarters. Then I got into my ward, which is a maternity ward, and then checked on a few of our special patients. They are special because they were having some difficulties with their pregnancies, and I was one of those nurses who had been assigned to them. It was around 10 a.m. that I came upon Lamley in the lobby leading to the pediatric ward. She was walking, but not like everyone else. She seemed to be taking her time. It's like you just woke up and you still have some sleep in your eyes. When I saw her that way, I thought something was wrong because of the way she was walking. So I went up to her and then said hello and asked her what was wrong. She said she was feeling a bit dizzy. She was actually holding her head, and then suddenly she just let herself go. She fell, and I held her up and then cried for someone to help. That's when 2 more nurses rushed to us and we brought her back to her feet. But after a few steps, she collapsed. Margot recounted, starting in a casual tone, but later sounding emotional. Casey narrated something similar and stated that she knew Lamley as a nurse who worked in the operating theater. She also revealed that the third nurse, who was presently absent, or who was currently absent, had been Lamley's colleague at that department. Therefore, she could provide more details about her. Angela asked of her name and where to find her, and Casey gave a name and address, but no phone number, since she didn't know of it. Dana had been sitting quiet for this entire time, and initially she didn't look happy to be there, but she spoke up after Angela had asked for Selma's phone number. Okay, so where are we now in the story? Now, police detective Angela Gatton, who works with Peter Brooks, that's Madeleine's ex-lecturer and lawyer. Madeleine's ex-lecturer, and lawyer. Peter Brooks is Madeleine's lawyer, and he's also her ex-lecturer. So Angela Gatton is on Peter Brooks' team. She was sent to the hospital to investigate Lamley's death. So now she's talking with the 2 nurses who came to her aid when she fainted. Okay? And there's Dana Westfield, who is a hospital administrator. She's also at the table, and she's there listening to the conversation. And initially she didn't want to be there because she didn't sleep the previous night. But now she wants to join in the conversation because Angela Gatton, that's Detective Gatton, wants the phone number of the third nurse who came to Lamley's aid when she fainted at the hospital. Dana had been sitting quiet for this entire time, and initially she didn't look happy to be there, but she spoke up after Angela had asked for Selma's phone number. No problem, we could get her number from her records. Just give me a minute, Dana said, and then logged into the laptop on the table. Minutes later, Angela was calling, but no one answered. She dialed her app a second time, but that didn't change the response. Selma Rashid was 2 years younger than Lamley, who was 35 at the time of her departure. Both women had joined the hospital around the same time, about 12 years ago. However, Selma had formerly been stationed at a different department, just like Lamley. The former had been working as a nurse in the children's ward or the Department of Pediatrics, whereas the latter was at the Accident and Emergency Unit. So now we know that there's a nurse called Selma Rashid, and she was the third one to come to Lamley's aid when she fainted in the hospital suffering from the concussion. Okay. So now Detective Galton has been able to get her number thanks to Dana Westfield. They got her number from her records. She's called up Selma Rashid, but there's no response. Okay, so that's where we are now. Selma was the third nurse who helped Casey and Margot carry Lamley to the emergency ward, but no one has seen her around ever since Lamley's departure. And Angela didn't find her in her apartment either. It was locked, but she managed to open it up with a special key and entered with her assistants. The silence in there suggested that there was no one around, but she still called out her name. Selma, are you there? Hello? Selma Rashid? Hello? She cried, standing in the living room. Jean and Phoebe were glancing about for clues. The curtains were totally covering the windows, blocking any view from outside. There were no flames in the fireplace, and the leftover wood in there felt damp. Okay. So now Detective Angela Gatton is in Selma Rashid's apartment, and Selma is the third nurse who came to Lamley's aid when she fainted at the hospital. There were no flames in the fireplace, and the leftover wood in there felt damp, suggesting that there had been no activity recently. Phoebe was the one who realized this after checking the fireplace. Subsequently, she informed the others about it. Angela nodded and then continued her search for Selma or any signs of her. She entered the kitchen and it was all clear. No leftover food, no hot water in the kettle, no coffee cups sitting about. There was nothing. The last person to use the place had tied it up so well that there was nothing to suggest when it was last used. Moreover, the windows were shut. At the bedroom, the bed had been nicely laid and the windows were shut. Moreover, the closet wasn't empty. As there were a good number of dresses in there. Okay? At the bedroom, the bed had been nicely laid and the windows were shut. However, the closet wasn't empty, as there were a good number of clothes in there. And that meant that she was still around. With all the windows shut in that single bedroom house, Angela perceived that Selma must have taken a trip out of town. After the hour-long search of the house was over, they left, returning to their station. Back in her office, Angela called up Madeleine and told her about her progress so far in Lamley's case. Selma was now the key to finding out more about her friend, but she was yet to track her down. For about 5 years they worked together in the operating theater, yet they weren't best friends. To Selma, Lamley was someone you could rely on, as a patient or as a colleague. She was lively at her job and ready to attend to anyone who came in with a problem or an injury. Okay, so this marks the 130th page of the story The Power of Coffee. At this point, we learn that the investigation into Lumley's death has begun in Canada. Madeleine is in Canada now, and now Angela Gatton is the one who is leading the investigation. Okay, she's a police officer who is began the investigation into Lumley's death. And we've also learned that Selma Rashid was the third nurse who came to Lumley's aid when she fainted at the hospital after the concussion. Now, Detective Angela Gatton is in Selma Rashid's apartment, but she's not available. And she's trying to track her down. So that's where we are at the 130th page of the story, The Power of Coffee. Join me for the next 10 pages to make a 140th page of the story. See you then.